back.
I came back, yes. Born in Sanger. My parents moved me to the Bay Area when I was very young, grew up there. All my aunts, uncles, grandparents, all my cousins all live here in the Valley in Fresno County, pretty much. And then just life was good to me, sent me around the country doing some cool stuff. And an opportunity came to get back to Fresno in 2014. And I took advantage of that and have loved it ever since. Been a great journey. Been having a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I can call you a friend. I got to work with you a ton in your former position, both two former positions, because you were over on the public utility side for the city of Fresno and dealt with you on some water issues. But then you took a short stint, a 2-year stint over at Fresno State as their associate vice president for water and sustainability. So you definitely understand one of the bigger issues of this area.
Yes, exactly. And working at the university, I thought, it's a big organization. So it got me kind of conditioned for coming into the city. It was great.
Exactly. Well, not to step on your boss's toes here, but you guys took over. You took over a week ago. So what's some of the priority issues you're going to be working on the first, people like to say that first 100 days, but what's the priority issue for the first few months?
Yeah. So during his campaign, he knocked on doors, walked the pavements, talked to a lot of people, and he came down as a result of that with identifying 5 big things that the community kind of shared with him. The number one thing is homeless and housing. We've got to get a handle on the homeless and housing issues. We're going to be launching a program here this week into next week, and it'll probably go about 6 weeks, where we're going to be helping the homeless that are currently encamped on our freeways, helping them transition to some housing. And so we received some funding from the state to purchase some hotels and then get them upfitted and retrofitted for housing. And so we'll be working with our folks that are homeless that are living on the freeways and getting them housing there, and then starting to move other people that are around the city and other areas as well to that house. So housing and homeless are one of the key priorities, and getting after that on the homeless side. On the housing side, I don't know if you've all been watching, but we're pretty much like on the apartment complex side, multifamily side. They will tell you that they're either at or near 100% occupancy, which just tells us we're pretty strapped on our housing. So we've got to get more housing built, and we're working as fast as we can to get projects entitled, get permit and plans approved, and get some housing built in the city, because the affordability is starting to become a problem. And you can see that with the tight buyer market, and just the housing stock is another priority he's after. The other one he's after is beautify Fresno. He just, the city doesn't look as pretty as it should, and he's not apologizing for that, but he is going to commit some resources and funding to get after the litter, certainly the blight, the graffiti, landscape, potholes, broken sidewalks, all of those things related that kind of contribute to the overall beauty and aesthetic of this city. It's a great city. He wants to make the investments in the city to make sure that it reflects that greatness that we want to project to folks. The other important one is inclusive economic development. It's one thing to go out, and that's what we're doing right now, is talking to a lot of different investors and companies about coming here to relocate here. A lot of companies we're talking to are just, with the COVID, the supply chain and reinforcing that supply chain seem to be a common theme. So onshoring things back to the US is something we're preparing for. Obviously, the relocation out of the expensive Bay Area and LA, a place that's affordable, that people can telework. We're trying to set ourselves up to attract that type of business. But the other thing is just, we've got a lot of people in the valley, in the city, that we just need to find a way to get them access to these opportunities. And whether that's education, let's help them get there so they can be prepared. Workforce development, let's help them do that so we can get them prepared. Just basic life skill, financial management, let's help them get that so they can get prepared. But we want to get our employees employed. We want to get our citizens employed now that we seem to have this opportunity to attract some businesses that might not have looked at Fresno the way they do now, but we're in the middle of 40 million people, literally the geographic center of 40 million people. We want to take advantage of that. And so inclusive economic development is high on his priority. Youth leadership. You know, the mayor has just through the course of his work with through the police department and the police chief, he just, you know, during that process, he just encountered a lot of youth in our community that just didn't have access to education opportunities, economic opportunities, just the family structure and the coaching and the mentoring to help kind of, you know, get people moving into a career or a life path and basic life skills. So we're going to be making a heavy investment in the youth leadership development, using our park system now that we have the Measure P, or it appears the Measure P, using that as a way to get our youth access to arts programs, education programs, tutoring, job skill development, life skill development, and just helping them, you know, reach the greatness and achieve the greatness that we know that they can be. So youth leadership, you'll see a lot of efforts we're going to put into youth leadership development. And then the final one, I say it's final, it's just on his list, but is downtown development. Great cities have great downtowns. That's what he's committed to. And so I was just on the phone just now with some folks downtown about, you know, getting some stuff out of the ground. The metric we're going to use for downtown is the metric I'll tell you. And if you don't see it, then you come talk to us about it, is cranes in the air. We'll know if we're doing what we need to do downtown if we have cranes in the air, building the kind of stuff that we need to build. And that's housing, where we do the housing, you know, new commercial, retail. We've got the new downtown high-speed rail station that we're starting to get serious on the planning for. But we're looking forward to just getting downtown out of the ground and up and running. We're really excited. A lot of people out there interested in investing, so we got to make it easy for them.
Oh, that's
but those are his big lifts that he wants to make. And then we just have the normal work we have to do. We have a new police chief. Got to get the new police chief on board. We have police chief reform commission recommendations. We got to kind of get those adapted to the system.
It's going to be a busy few months, I'm sure. So, and I know we're going to schedule Mr. Mayor to come on here within a relatively short time, give him some time to get some, I know he's hit the ground running, but give him some time to be the actual mayor. And then we're going to have him on here to talk about all those priorities in some big detail there.
Exactly. So everybody's here. We're working hard and getting out to everybody and excited. Hopefully get to see you folks and participate and have you help us kind of move these big rocks that we need to move to bring this city forward. But we're all very, very excited. And Ryan, thank you so much for the invitation. Really, really, really appreciate it. Humbled that you thought of us to share some of our ideas here and where we're headed.
I appreciate that, Tommy. Thanks so much. Looking forward to your administration, and definitely hope to see you back in the future here.
I'll be back. Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you.
Well, to move on now to our speaker of the day, I was trying to think about who would be great to introduce the speaker, and I thought, why not one of his former students that I didn't have to go too far. So I'm going to have my wife, Ashley, introduce our speaker for the day.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Good afternoon, everyone. So I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Victor Hanson for you today. And most of you probably know that he was born and raised in Selma, where he has worked on his family's raisin farm for most of his life. I did a little Wikipedia research in preparation for this and discovered that his mother was a lawyer and a California Superior Court and State Appeals Court Justice. And his father was a farmer, educator, as well as a junior college administrator. So that's something I didn't know before. And as Ryan mentioned, I first met Dr. Hanson in the fall of 1999, which was my first semester at Fresno State. Part of the honors college program that I was part of, the inaugural class, was that we had to take 2 honors classes each semester. And Dr. Hanson was one of our very first honors classes, Humanities 10. And during that time, I was really engaged in his class because of his ability to connect ancient Greece with the present day. And he's able to draw many parallels and really demonstrate how history repeats itself. And then after 9/11 happened, he catapulted into the national spotlight because of his ability to do this and his military history background. So most of you likely know him as a commentator on modern and ancient warfare and contemporary politics for National Review, The Washington Times, and other media outlets. He is a senior fellow in classics and military history at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. And with that said, please join me in giving him a warm Zoom welcome to our fellow Fresno Rotarian as he shares his perspectives on politics and the state of the nation. Welcome, Dr. Hanson.
Thank you, Ashley. I remember you as a A student and you did almost a perfect final. I still remember that 21 years ago. I thought maybe what I would do today is very quickly survey the crisis that we're in, but maybe from a different angle of suggesting what each side might have done to avert it or what they could do to avert it. I'll start with the Trump side. It was pretty clear that by February 2020, his opponents, and I'm quoting now verbatim from a Bloomberg article, thought that he would be reelected. And they based that on the fact that we had 3.5 unemployment, record minority on low unemployment. The economy was about 2.5 GDP, and the Democrats had not done well in the primary. Michael Bloomberg was coming out of the shadows to replace Joe Biden, I guess, as the moderate compromise candidate. Kamala Harris hadn't seen one delegate and dropped out. And then all of a sudden, the world dropped. The world was turned upside down, I should say. So in a series of 60 days, we had the COVID outbreak, the quarantine, the recession. That led into the George Floyd tragic killing. That led into 90 days of rioting, looting, arson. That led into radical changes in the voting structure and laws. That led into 100 million people voting for the first time without showing up at election day. First time we have ever had it. We had 40% in 2016. This election, 62% did not vote on election day. And then finally, we had the contested election. Joe Biden won clearly the popular vote, but 42,000 votes in 5 states would have won Donald Trump the election. So where are we now? I think Donald Trump had a legitimate reason to suggest that there were irregularities in the voting. And I say that based on affidavits, statistical analysis, data incongruity. But the question was, could you prove that you lost particular states that you would have won, and could you prove that very quickly, at least before December 11th, when the electors were to be chosen? And he took a month to do that. And I think what happened was they did not realize if you were a Trump supporter, the election was essentially lost in March, April, May, when in key states, the voting laws were changed under the fear of COVID. By that, I mean, the Constitution says state legislatures alone can make voting laws, and yet they were modified, massaged in a way by local magistrates, local judges, bureaucrats. And the Supreme Court under Justice Roberts in a 5-4 decision determined not to intervene. Nobody took much notice at the time, but that mail-in 100 million ballots would make it very difficult for Trump to win, especially given the perfect storm of events of 2020. So then what do? After legitimate grievances, I think around November, I wrote an article and I got a call from the White House very angry about it, but I suggested that you should obey the electors. You've done all you can, and go down to Georgia if you were a Republican, as Trump was, and try to galvanize that state and reassure swing voters that you were not doing anything out of the ordinary and constitutionally or historically or customarily. Tell your base that their vote still counted and win those 2 seats, and then hold the Senate for the Republicans and be the so-called savior of the Senate, and then become the nominal head of the opposition party, feel that you had righteous grievance, maybe about irregularities, mobilize your troops, win the midterm of 2022, increase the Senate margin, and you would be sort of a tragic hero, but very popular. He didn't do that. Obviously, when he did go to Georgia, it was late. He talked mostly about the injustice done to him. He challenged the electors at the congressional level, which we hadn't really seen before in our history. There were 1876, 1824, there were things similar, but not in the modern period. And then he had that protest. Nothing wrong if you want to have a peaceful protest, but if you're the president of the United States and tensions are running high, and even though you say peacefully and patriotically protest, if you tell people to go to Congress while it's in session, you're naive if you don't think there's going to be something happen. He didn't incite the riot, but he was culpable, I think, for not telling everybody to go home after the initial rally. So at that point, he could have avoided, I think, the situation that he's in now, had he just accepted the verdict by at least December 1st. Okay, so how about his opposition? They have choices as well. And they were very angry at him, but remember, when he entered office, the day that he entered, McDonough said she wanted to blow up the White House, and I could mention other things that were said. 58 congressmen had never even heard of him or didn't have any idea what he would do, and they voted to impeach him. Rosa Brooks, a very influential Democratic strategist, wrote in Foreign Policy that they should have a military coup to remove him. And then we had 4 years of Mueller and 25th Amendment and Logan Act and emoluments clause. So at some point, and then impeachment without conviction. So there was that automatic Pavlovian hatred of him for a variety of reasons. So what should the Democrats have done? Well, I think they could have censored him, but when they said that he was solely responsible for the violence and he should be indicted, he should be impeached and convicted, he should be removed by the 25th Amendment, he should be banned from social media. The problem with all of that they're in right now is everybody is saying, okay, let's have symmetry then. We just want to know what the rules are. The Ayatollah Khamenei tweeted not long ago that Israel should be wiped out with the Jewish people. He's on Twitter. Kathy Griffin, the day after the election, held up that picture of Donald Trump's decapitated head. She's on Twitter. Where Joe Biden said the police were racist, and if black people had have done what the Trump supporters, they would have been shot. We know that Roz Simone, an African-American, occupied downtown Seattle for 3 weeks. 4 people were shot, 2 people were killed, and that was part of a $10 billion perhaps in lost wages, work, and destruction, 33 people killed, 700 law enforcement officers. Kamala Harris said that she wanted the protest to continue, and she worked to bail out people who were convicted of violence. So you see where I'm going. Once you started to do that extreme reaction, rather than just say, you know what, the Trump tenure is over, we're going to unite the nation, and we have the majority now in the House and the Senate, I think they would have had goodwill, but that was not enough. So now we are trying to find ways to humiliate Trump or to his supporters, the 74 million of them. And we get into new territory. In the 19th century, the railroads and the oil companies were deemed trust and cartels, monopolies. We had the Sherman Antitrust Act. And what did they do? They tried to rig competition, I should say, in competition. They gave money to politicians, and the result was they created massive pushback on the argument they were public utilities. Silicon Valley has told Republicans that we're laissez-faire capitalists, so let us alone. So they did. And then they went and told the left, all the money and support's going to you, and we rig, searches or deplatforming for you. And they played off both sides. Now I think what's happened, they had sort of a night of the long knives, if I could use that image, that all of a sudden Amazon, Twitter, Google coincidentally stopped Parler, and they deplatformed that alternative social media site as well as others. And so what they basically did, they've used the public airways, which is a public utility, and they've stifled criticism. And why are they doing that? Because when the Senate resumes on the 21st for its first day of business, it's not going to be pushing policy in the sense of the new Green Deal or maybe let's open the border again. I mean, that's the agenda, but that's not what they're going to be interested in. They're going to be interested in changing the process. And by that, I mean, for the first time in 160 years, we're going to have a motion to get rid of a 9-person Supreme Court. For the first time in 234 years, there's going to be efforts to end the Electoral College. For the first time in 60 years, there's going to be efforts to add 2 more states and with them 4 senators and 2 representatives. For the first time in 170 years, of course, they'll require the end of the filibuster. These are revolutionary things that nobody on either party, when they had the majority, as Trump did with the Senate and the House in 2017, or Obama did in 2009, nobody's ever attempted that before. And to pull that off, I think they needed a monopoly on knowledge. And so it's very unusual that all of a sudden Michelle Obama would say, I think that Trump should be deplatformed from all social media, and his supporters who joined in with him. And then suddenly the next day, Google, Amazon, and Twitter do exactly that. And in addition to that, there's now calls to what? Ban particular books. Josh Hawley's book that was an attack on Silicon Valley. Why was that? Why did that title get dropped? And let's say In Defense of Looting did not. A book that was published and NPR featured it very favorably about how it was good to go and loot and protest and steal. So there's no symmetry, and I think the left now is sort of in a situation where Trump was when he went too far. And I'll just finish and open it up for question. What are we looking at? And I think we're looking at the most radical effort to change the way government operates in our lifetime, the most radical effort to change the method of communication in our lifetime. Remember, the railroads used to say, if you don't like the railroad, take a horse, ride your horse. And that didn't wash with the government. And social media is saying, if you don't like what we did, use your cell phone, get off social. That's not going to wash either. And we're going to have the most radical reaction to all this that we've seen. And it's getting to the point where I think everybody's got to take a step back. Otherwise, we're going to see 2021, despite the vaccination, despite the natural economic recovery, to be more tumultuous and dangerous than 2020. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Great, thank you, Dr. Hanson. Got a few here on the chat feature. I'll just kind of take them in order as far as what I have in front of me here. Dr. Hanson, is there any way to go back, investigate if there was fraud in the election? If so, by reconstructing the election and finding that if Trump should have won, and what action, if any, could be done?
I don't think there is now at this point, just because of custom and tradition. And Donald Trump needed 2 things right after the election. He needed a recount in Georgia, probably Wisconsin and Arizona. He got 2 of them, but the recounts weren't going to find anything because they didn't question the actual votes. They questioned the counting of the votes. And those votes, that was determined in March and April when Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan said that the state legislatures that had created the voting laws did not anticipate an epidemic, and therefore they were going to change them, they being local magistrates, judges, county registrars, bureaucrats. And what did they do? They said things like, if the ballot comes in 10 days late, 12 days late, it's still going to be valid. If the ballot comes in without a signature, it's still going to be valid. If the ballot does not have an address, it will be valid. If you registered and were sent a ballot from the DMV, the disability office, the unemployment, whatever state bureaucracy sends you a registration and a ballot, in some states the same time, and those outnumber by far the number of ballots that were actually turned back in, and nobody wants to know where they are, what happened to them. It didn't matter. And so at that point, I don't see how he was going to overturn that election, especially when he lost the popular vote, and especially when John Roberts did not want to get the Supreme Court. And so just speaking on the point of his personal interests, the personal interests were if he had an agenda to save It was stop this radical left takeover by winning the Senate. And I think he could have done that. He came very close as it was, and then win the midterm. And as Jackson, remember what Jackson said in 1824, it's, the election was stolen by John Quincy Adams. I'm not going to contest it, but I'm going to be back in 1828 with an agenda, and you're not going to be able to stop me. And that's exactly what he did.
History seems to rhyme, not repeat. Is China catapulting the rise of Japan in the earliest 20th century?
Could you say that again? I'm sorry, Ryan, I didn't quite hear.
Yeah, no problem. It's history seems to rhyme, not repeat. Is China recapitulating the rise of Japan in the early 20th century?
Yeah, I've written that about before. Remember, in the late 20s and 30s, they started to create what later became the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, where they told basically the Philippines, Southeast Asia, parts of the Koreans, everybody in the Pacific, the United States is weak, it's declining, it's in a depression, it's decadent, we have a bigger Navy in the Pacific, deal with us or else. And that's what China's saying right now. They're saying the United States is fraught with racial class divisions. It can't even conduct an election. An authoritarian solidarity totalitarianism is much better. They didn't handle the virus, i.e. that originated with Wuhan, as well as we did. And if you're Australia, if you're South Korea, if you're Japan, if you're Taiwan, there's little likelihood the United States is going to come to your aid, especially now that Biden is in. The defense budget's going to be cut some. He's 78 years old. He wants to get rid of the tariffs. So you better deal with us, because the United States is on the wane, and it's very similar. Will the outcome be similar? I hope so, because in our waning moments, we're still militarily much stronger. And although we only have 1/4, if that, of the Chinese population, one American worker still produces twice the goods and services as 4 Chinese counterparts. So we're doing pretty well, but we've got to change radically, because we can't go on with $28 trillion in debt and this culture that is canceling people out, and it's a McCarthy say them witchcraft culture, and it's not sustainable.
What are your projections as Trump goes out of office? What does Congress continue to investigate? Can the impeachment process continue? And what else to expect from towards him?
Well, that will depend, I think, on the 2022 election. But it's always wise that when you're in power, and this comes from the historian Thucydides, you never destroy the institutions that you think are in your favor or working against it. You consider them neutral, because you never know when you're going to need them. Sort of like saying, you know, I don't want to ever give any donations to the volunteer fire department, and then all of a sudden there's a fire and you need it. So what the Democrats did was they impeached a first-term president. We've never had that quite happen before since Andrew Johnson. It's always been a second term, or the effort to impeach them. And then second, they appointed a special counsel, but they never allowed cross-examination during the hearings. The special counsel report found no culpability, but they still impeached him. And then in addition to that, they continually tried to silence people on social media, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so now Joe Biden is president. What happens if Hunter Biden was not telling a lie? And he said on his emails, and they're verified by the FBI, that the big guy got a 10% cut. What if he didn't pay? Joe Biden has a $4 million estate. What if he didn't pay income tax on the 10% cut? What's going to happen? John Durham going to investigate that too? Is Joe Biden going to cancel that investigation? Or the Republicans, when they get back the House, the moment they get it back, are they going to do what the Democrats did and impeach Joe Biden in his first term? Are they going to try to get a special counsel against Joe Biden? In other words, Or are they going to do the same thing that the Democrats did? Because Biden will have, I think, as many liabilities as Trump. We never had anybody discuss removing a president because of the 25th Amendment. We've had people that have colonoscopies or whatever for a day or two. But when they said that Donald Trump should be removed, he took the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test to defend himself. And so they would drop discussion. Rod Rosenstein and Andrew McCabe wore a wire to try to entrap Donald Trump as being, are we going to do that with Joe Biden? What happens in 6 months if Joe Biden's on television and he's talking to Putin or Premier Xi and he forgets where he is? It's possible. Or he mangles another sentence. Is somebody going to say, this guy's got to be removed? He's non compos mentis. So be very careful when you destroy institutions, because they'll come back to haunt you. And I think that's where the Democrats are going to be in trouble if the Republicans take the House. And remember what usually happens. It happened to Barack Obama. It happened to Donald Trump. You can be very popular when you're elected and have both houses of Congress, but I think it goes back to Jimmy Carter. Every president who's entered office with 2 houses of Congress has lost one within the first 2 years.
You answered the next question on the 25th Amendment. So the next one after that is, do you think this overreach will lead to the state's constitutional convention to counter their overreach?
No, I don't. I think there's too much fragmentation in the opposition. I think what's happening now on the Republican side is, after the initial revulsion after that disgraceful attack on the Capitol, there was sort of a mania, hysteria. So, you know, Liz Cheney said he should be impeached. The Wall Street Journal said he should resign. And everybody was trying to outdo it. Where I work at the Hoover Institution, everybody was emailing it. And then everybody took a deep breath. It's sort of like the Covington kids, when all of a sudden they had that initial picture and everybody said, I know at National Review, all of the editors, I got very angry and wrote them. I said, wait until you get the whole story. No, they had to go out and Twitter, tweet, Facebook that these kids should be arrested. They should be indicted for what? And then all of a sudden we found out that they were not culpable at all. Well, the same thing is, after the whole thing, the hysteria of 3 days passed, and all of a sudden people said, you know, this was a splinter group. That was terrible what they did. Donald Trump was reckless, but my God, we've had people contextualizing or excusing violence for 90 days. Then the quotes came out. This is what Joe Biden said about Antifa. Oh, it's just an idea. You know, billions of dollars of damage. Here's Kamala Harris. You know, these protests are going to go on and on. Here's Nancy Pelosi. I think there should be protests everywhere. So that started. And then there was, well, if you're going to cancel Josh Hawley's book, you better cancel these titles. And then if you're going to get him off Twitter, look at this Twitter. And then the whole thing started to equalize. And so a lot of these conservatives who were so quick, they went back home. And I can tell you, I talked to some of them, they went back home and they're shocked that there's a pushback against them now. And so I've been watching what they're saying, and now all of a sudden it's both sides, and we have to be very careful not to jump to conclusions, which they should have said in the beginning. But they wanted to virtue signal their outrage, and they didn't understand that half the country was sickened by the violence this summer and did not excuse what Trump had said, but was not ready to say that Trump uniquely was responsible for violence, but all of the left was not. And that was the implication they had given in their virtue signaling hysteria.
Is there, do you see any path forward to lessen the polarization of the nation at this point?
Any path forward for reconciliation?
Correct. Yes.
Well, it would have to work like this. I think that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer would have to say, this country is evenly divided. We have the narrowest majority we've had in 20 years in the House. It's 50-50 in the Senate with Kamala Harris. 42,000 votes either way would have won the election for Trump, etc. So we don't want to tamper with either the Constitution or the traditions of the last century. So we're not going to end the filibuster and the way that McConnell could have ended the filibuster 2 years ago. He could have ended any time. The Democrats have used it successfully. And they could say, you know what, Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., that's a big question. We're not going to just do that. And they could have said, we've had a 9-person court since 1869. We're not going to tamper. And we're not going to get this national voter compact and get rid of the, I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to push all of them. I think they're going to either stop construction of the wall or tear it down. I think they're going to go after the NRA. I think you're going to see the biggest effort by AOC and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and the squad to push through it. From what they say and what they write, it goes something like this. We had Obama, we had the Congress in 2009, we blew it, we sold out. We're never going to do that again. This is a chance of a lifetime. We got to change the system so we have perpetual power. And so I think that's going to happen. And I think it's going to be very acrimonious. I'm very worried about it.
And I'll take this as the last question I have here in the chat box. It was on the Electoral College, kind of your thoughts on where that goes forward. To many folks, they're arguing over whether or not that serves a purpose today, and wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, when you read the Federalist Papers 65 and 66, among others, I think it's 65 and 66, they talk about why we have an Electoral College. And their idea was that we were a constitutional republic and not a direct democracy. By that, they wanted to empower the states. And so they wanted the state legislatures, which originally, remember, until the 13th Amendment, picked the senators without a direct vote. So we were supposed to disperse power to the states by having the Electoral College. So nobody would go to Wyoming or Montana if you had a direct vote. The second one was the founders, so they said, felt rural people and farmers were valuable in a way, and they were very chauvinistic about that, that city people were not. In other words, you needed people outside of cities, which created uniformity and sort of monotony and groupthink. You needed people that were independent, rugged individuals to counteract them. Then they said they were very worried about voter fraud, believe it or not, and they believed if you dispersed it to states, you couldn't have the entire national popular vote rigged. They did this to such an degree, they don't use the word popular vote. And their way of thinking, it did not exist. It doesn't exist today. It's only a construct. All that matters were the state votes. And the question is, after 2000, when the Bush-Gore problem and the 2016 Trump-Clinton and this, and we've had 5 times now somebody's been elected without the popular vote, is it time to get rid of it? I don't think it is, because I think the founders were correct. If we had a direct vote, I think what we would see is candidates, to the extent they even campaign, they would go to the Bay Area, the Los Angeles area, the Chicago area, the Texas and Atlanta corridor, and then the Eastern Seaboard, and that would be it. There would be no need to campaign anywhere else. That's where the votes are, 55%, 65% of the vote. And I think that we would be all poor for it. The biggest problem I have is that with this control of government, one thing that is sure is there's going to be a national voter law passed. Remember what the Constitution says: state legislatures shall be in charge of establishing voting laws within their state, and they're all different, except if the federal government and the Congress intervene and override that, and they do. Women vote, the 18-year-old vote. You can't say that, and we're in California, 16-year-olds can vote. So on questions of gender, age, the Supreme Court has held that the Constitution says the federal government has the ultimate say. So they're going to pass a federal government law that's going to say something like, this percentage must be mail-in voting, or these states must have 40 or 50 or 30 days of early voting. But they're going to demand that every single state conform to a mode that they found very useful and conducive in 2020. And I think that would be very unfortunate because when Donald Trump had the second debate, the third, which would have been the third, the second was canceled, but the second time he debated, 75 million people had already voted. And so if you're a Trump supporter and you say, well, the Hunter Biden came out, 85 million people had voted. If you're in the same way, if you're a Biden person and you say, well, Donald Trump had a disastrous, a disastrous first debate, you say this is really great because we've already had 50 million. Or do you say it would have been even better if we'd voted on, because some of them had already voted before they saw Trump's disastrous performance. So what I'm getting at is we have destroyed the idea of election day. It really doesn't exist. It's only 40%. It's going to get down to 30 the next time. And there was a value of making the candidates campaign all the way to the end. And because of the short-sightedness or the idea of the left that wasn't in their interest, that mail-in voting was in their interest, we've ended that. Final note, I was attacked not long ago at Stanford University on this matter of the vote. And in the Daily, they wrote an op-ed, and it was very ironic because the person said, well, he's questioning mail-in voting. And we all know that that's racist and everything because mail-in voting is just as valid as in person. It took me, I think, 12 minutes to go onto the internet and find a lengthy investigative report conducted by whom? Stanford Law School. And the Stanford law professors and the particular committee, and they were worried about right-wing people trying to get a mail-in vote, believe it or not, because up until recently, the absentee voting were usually retired people, and they felt retired people would somehow silence the voice of the oppressed. And what did the Stanford investigative report found? There was no way to authenticate mail-in voting and legitimize it in the same manner as in-person voting, and therefore you were under the equal clause of the Constitution. You were privileging some people and not others. And now, of course, they've disowned that. So I think it would be the height of folly to turn our elections over to 100% mail-in voting. But as we're saying this right now, the left is in the process of drafting laws they think that will achieve that.
Any closing remarks, Dr. Hanson?
Well, I think all of us realize that we're in a say them which trial situation or McCarthy period or reign of terror, Robespierre of the 1793 revolution, that you can say one word, you can write one word, and you can be fired at your job, you can lose your business, you can be ostracized. And what's happened is where I work at Stanford University, and people who have other agendas, say if somebody hasn't been very productive, is afraid they're going to be fired, what do? They come out and give a manifesto that I think that Trump should be impeached, impaled, burned alive, or whatever. Or if somebody doesn't like somebody else, they'll say, you wrote this. So what's happening is, and that always happens in history, and I don't want to mention him twice, but the historian Thucydides has a great account of it at the island of Corfu. Personal agendas, financial agendas, feuds, they all take on the mask of politics. And because in this climate, it's kind of a Me Too of 2 years ago on steroids. All you do is accuse somebody of something and you can destroy them. And the result is everybody is paranoid and they're withdrawing into their own tribe. We're going to have one Facebook for conservatives and liberals, maybe me, we, or something for conservatives. We're going to have Twitter for conservatives. We're going to have Twitter for liberals, Parlay for conservatives. So we're dividing in two, and it's getting worse. And nobody has the moral authority or the desire to stop it. And it's even getting in families, as all of you know. You all have a family member who has written you an email or a text and saying, I just can't talk to you anymore. And so it's pretty scary And it's starting to take geographical dimensions of a red state, south and interior, and west versus two coast. And when you add a geographical force multiplier to the ideological and political dissension, you've got the ingredients of a civil war. So we got to be very careful. Everybody's got to, according to their station, say, I got to take a step back. What is my enemy trying to do? And how can I persuade them politely not to do that? And if I lose the argument, how can I not be vindictive and try to do that back to them if we can? I think it's time for the Sermon on the Mount rather than the as a classicist, the morality of the Iliad, where you punish enemies and you help only friends.
Well, Dr. Hanson, thank you so much. Let's give him a virtual round of applause. Really do appreciate you coming today. By far, you shattered our attendance record, almost double our last high. So there was lots of interest, and particularly, I think after the events of last week, there was folks who just wanted to hear your take on things. And as always, really appreciate you taking the time to come see us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, Dr. Hanson. Well, good. Well, thank you. And again, we're very fortunate with us that Dr. Hanson donated a couple of books for today's raffle. So if you're interested in getting those autographed books, please get a hold of Anna ASAP, because she will give those out to all of our guests. I know a few of you are going to stick around, but I know some of you might drop off. Thank you so much for attending today. We'll love to have you back. And if you're interested in Rotary, make sure you talk to the person who invited you today. And with that, I'm going to end our, let's see here, give me 1 second, our poll question for the day. I am going to share that right now. And oh, wow, look at that. This must be Rotary. Number 3, the most supportive person of the year was the #1 choice. So definitely seems very Rotarian to select that one #1. And that was by far the #1. And the closest one next was the most influential change-making person of the year. So thank you for taking part of that. We really enjoy trying to shake things up and do things differently. And so the poll has allowed us a little opportunity to do that. I am now going to hand it over to Mr. Dick Harrington, who's going to recognize a few of our fellow Rotarians today.
Well, thank you, President Ryan. Anna Bajan, would you make sure you're unmuted and that your video is on?
I am. Thank you, Dick.
Well, I understand that you have now been with us 4 years as a Rotarian member, and we really appreciate your input and all that you have done for the Rotary Club of Fresno. But I understand there's been a couple things that have happened in your organization you'd like to tell us about.
Sure. Well, I'm going to ring the bell for my longevity so far in Rotary. I've loved it. It's just been fun meeting so many wonderful people around the community and being able to serve alongside you. And then the other thing is that before online news, when newspapers used to be, they would break the news early. They would come out with the early edition. It would be called the Bulldog. So there's a Bulldog Award for my industry, public relations, and my team won the Bulldog Award for the best education campaign of 2020. So I want to ring that bell. And then this year, this last school year, we had, yeah, there's the Bulldog. This last school year, the third one, I wanted to share that we had more than 2,500 at-risk graduates make it to the finish line. And so there was about 900 in the Fresno area, in the Fresno Central Valley area. But collectively, all of our schools were able to get some of those kids who had been disengaged back into school and across the finish line. So I want to shout out to all of our graduates for the last school year.
Those are really terrific awards and activities that have gone on. And hey, you may have started a new tradition here. I think everybody ought to have their own bell when we are recognizing people. So again, congratulations on everything that's been happening in your organization. And we're glad you're a member of the Rotary Club of Fresno. Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie Rigby, are you on? And would you unmute yourself and make sure there you are. You're newly back with us, and we're really pleased that you have rejoined us as a Fresno Rotarian. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with you.
Well, so since we last spoke, I am with the Fresno County District Attorney's Office, and I'm so excited to be back. I'm in court most days, and unfortunately, Monday has traditionally been one of my court days, but I've recently changed assignments to where I am now not in court on Mondays, which means I can make it back to meetings. So I was very excited for that change so that I could be active with Rotary again. I've been very fortunate that despite COVID and all of the things that are going on in society right now, our office has been trucking forward. We're doing so carefully, masks, sanitizing, social distancing, but we are able to continue with our cases. So that has been a good thing. And then just on a personal note, I did actually get to sneak away for a little bit of a vacation in October. Oh, there, Anna put it up there. So I finally made it to one of my bucket list spots. I made it to the Grand Tetons and to Yellowstone. And we weren't expecting snow, so we had to dig ourselves out with a pizza box. That's that picture, but you know, a couple gals from California will find a way to make it to Yellowstone. So we got innovative and did make it through. And there's our new friend. We got to see some very cool wildlife, and it got pretty close, but it was an incredible trip, very majestic. Oh, there you go, Jenny Lake at the Grand Tetons. So it was a really cool experience, but glad to be back at the office, glad to be back at Rotary. And I don't have a bell, but
well, thank you very much, Katie. And we're glad that your schedule changed somewhat so that you can join us on Mondays at whenever you can. We really appreciate your being with us before, and we're really glad that you came back again.
Oh, so glad to be back. Thank you, Dick. I appreciate it.
Claude Laval, if you would unmute yourself and make sure your video is working also.
I am.
I'm not going to say how long you have been with the Rotary Club of Fresno, but I know it's more than 4 years.
Yeah, unfortunately it is. I joined Rotary in 1962, so this is my 59th year. Certainly not my 59th year of perfect attendance, but my 59th year. And when I joined, my father and my grandfather were both members. This is a picture taken on the day that I became a member. In the foreground is my grandfather, Pop Laval, my father, and myself. So on that particular day, there were 3 members of the downtown Rotary Club named Claude Laval, which there wasn't anything else like that. So this picture was taken to be sent to Rotary International, and it was in the Rotarian magazine. But a lot of changes have happened over the last 59 years. Looking at that picture, it's, you know, it would be really interesting to get some of the older members to kind of describe how things have changed. As you can see from that picture, nobody came to Rotary that didn't have a dark suit on. We were only allowed to wear hats after Memorial Day, and they were straw hats. There were a lot, and then the classification system was of such huge importance that it would take years to get somebody into a you know, now categories are split in a million different ways, but there's really a lot of changes have occurred, but it's always been worthwhile and I've enjoyed it.
Well, Claude, thank you very much for all your service to the Rotary Club of Fresno over the years. And as you know, as those that don't know, Claude is now on our board of the Rotary Club of Fresno Foundation, and that's an important job for our club and for the community. So thank you, Claude, for all you have done for the Rotary Club of Fresno.
All right, I don't have anything to bang on here, but somebody will ring something 5 times, I'd be glad to do that.
Bang, 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 bang. Thank you very much, Claude. Thank you for your support of the community projects of the club. Now, Joe Denham, if you're on board here, if you could unmute and make sure your video is working also.
I'm here.
Bill, I understand you have a new position at the Chamber of Commerce. What's going on there?
Well, I'm proud to say I'm a feminist pioneer. I'm the first person to follow their mother into position as the chair of the Chamber of Commerce.
When do you take office, or have you taken office?
I've technically taken office. Our installation will be on the 14th. Unfortunately, we won't have a great party this year. It'll be via Zoom, but we're looking forward to things this year working out so that we can all get together again. I'm sure as everyone in Rotary is.
I think we all want to get together, and I sure hope that that happens sooner than later, but time will only tell as we go through that. Well, congratulations. Okay, go ahead.
I have a bell. This is my handcrafted bell from Zimbabwe, so I'll give you 2 rings there.
Bill, thank you very much for your support of the community projects and the good that we do in the community. And congratulations to all those that we recognize today and their support for our community projects. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I love hearing your stories and what's going on in your world. So appreciate it. So congrats on those remarkable things going on. As a reminder, we are dark next week. Next Monday, we are not having a meeting because of Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, but we will be back in 2 weeks with Assembly Member Jim Patterson, who's going to give us an update on Gavin's Law. And I do expect to have several of Gavin's family members in attendance as well. This is the law. He was unfortunately tragically killed by a DUI driver a few years ago. And there was legislation to kind of close this loophole. It did fail last year, but I know it's going to be back for another term. And so we're going to hear from Assembly Member Jim Patterson about that particular piece of legislation. And with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Miss Anna, who is the popular person right now, because I'm sure we had a great raffle today for those 2 signature books. And so Anna, go ahead and draw our winner.
Yes, thank you so much to Victor and his team for providing those 2 books that are autographed. And thank you to everybody who purchased tickets as well. And the grand winner is Richard Shahadi. Congratulations.
Oh, great. Congrats. And with that said, everybody, thank you for joining us today. I hope you had a great, wonderful meeting and have a safe week. We will see you back here in 2. Thank you so much.